This is one of my absolute favorite topics, and I feel like I say that probably every episode just because I love brain science and body science, but today I really mean it because it is something I incorporate daily. It is something we incorporate in the LA Wellness Sisterhood workouts, every single workout. It's just something that allows us to be more present with ourselves, experience more joy from a certain experience, even if it is negative, more joy from our workouts, more joy from a certain interaction, more joy from relationships with others, and that is gratitude. It's so important. So we'll talk about the science of gratitude, what an effective gratitude practice looks like, because I guarantee it's not what you think, and how gratitude has all of these brain health benefits, and incorporating a regular gratitude practice can have all of these long-term and short-term brain health benefits. Welcome back to Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsey Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy, a pelvic floor physical therapist, and the owner and founder of the LA Wellness Sisterhood. And before we dive in, a few updates, but we are still working on building that menstrual cycle program. So I know y'all are sick of me saying this, but I will leave a form below for all of your input so that you guys can help me build it. How many workouts, how long of a program, what you've loved, what you didn't love about programs in the past. And at the end, there's going to be a spot to enter your email if you want to be a free tester for the program. Other than that, it's completely anonymous. But thank you guys for all of you who have already filled out the form. It has been so helpful in helping us to build this program. And while we're on the topic of thanks and gratitude, I just want to say a sincere thank you, just beyond like times 1,000 to you guys for following along, for listening to this podcast, for subscribing, for reviewing, for supporting me on any channel that this podcast is posted or we're promoting this podcast. I just super duper appreciate it. I love educating, and my whole goal is to create just a sisterhood and a misterhood of people who are more educated on their own bodies and inspired to take action in their own health and wellness. So thank you guys, all the texts, all the DMs, everything. It just, anytime you guys reach out and say like, oh, I learned this, or thank you for doing this, or hey, maybe I would love to learn more about this. Like, that means the world to me because I want to make this the most valuable for you guys. And it's just me shouting out into the universe with things that I find interesting and things that I've heard that you guys find interesting too. So thank you guys for following along, for listening. And again, I hope you guys have found value in this podcast. And yeah, just thank you. Each follower, subscriber, like, comment, review, like all of it means so much to me. And I don't think y'all really have any idea. If you've created something in the past that other people have supported you in, it's just like the warmest feeling. It's just, even people who, you wouldn't consider like the best of friends or anything, anyone, strangers who are supporting you on the internet or wherever, it's just, it makes me feel so much more connected. And yeah, I'm just forever grateful to you guys. Thank you for supporting me. So let's dive in, all the sappiness, let's dive in to what effective gratitude practices can do for our brains. They can, of course, rewire our brains. They can change how our nervous systems respond, reduce fear and anxiety. They can improve motivation and our sense of well-being. But again, all of these things come with an effective gratitude practice, which I think a lot of us think of gratitude practices as write down 5 things you're thankful for every single day, which that is great. I am not discouraging that at all. But there is a more effective and science-backed way to perform those gratitude practices in order to get all of those brain health benefits. So we'll dive into that at the end to take away just some actionable tips for building out your own gratitude practice. But the actual science behind gratitude, an effective gratitude practice can target 2 different areas of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex and then also the amygdala. So the medial prefrontal cortex is in charge of analyzing a situation. It's in charge of how we evaluate certain situations and how we decide whether we are going to shift towards more pro-social behaviors or defensive behaviors, or pro-social pathways in the brain or defensive pathways in the brain. So pro-social pathways allow us to enjoy that experience that much deeper. It allows us to be more present with ourselves and those around us. It allows us to just extract a greater amount of detail and how we experience things from the event. In contrast, defensive pathways or defensive behaviors force us to sort of crawl inward. They're associated with fear, cold, anxiety, and we take more of a defensive stance and we sort of back away. We sort of go into a little bit of a shell when presented with a certain environment, and we are shifted towards more of those defensive pathways or defensive behaviors. So these pro-social behaviors and defensive behaviors exist on a seesaw. So our brains can be shifted to favor one versus the other, and a gratitude practice can help us to favor more of those pro-social pathways compared to those defensive pathways, which is definitely what we want. So a little example, but imagine you are about to do a cold plunge. Now, if we're shifted towards more of those pro-social pathways, we might be thinking, this is going to create greater long-term health benefits. I'm doing this now, I'm having this momentary pain now for greater benefit long-term. And that's an example of how our brains can extract greater detail and greater joy from a certain event when we are favoring those pro-social pathways compared to those defensive pathways. Let's say someone's forcing you to do a cold plunge. You definitely don't want to do that. So if you're shifted more to those defensive behaviors, you might go more into your shell. You might have fear, you might have anxiety, you might just have a little bit more of just a defensive stance to that same experience rather than with that pro-social behavior stance that we're taking of, okay, this is good for our health now and long term. So it's the same experience, but we are approaching it in a very different ways. And we definitely want to be approaching things more with those pro-social pathways and pro-social behaviors, or at least shifting our brains towards that way. And a gratitude practice, an effective gratitude practice can do that for us. So a regular, purposeful, and genuine gratitude practice can help shift our brains towards more of those pro-social pathways, and it can create that natural seesaw tilt at rest towards more of those pro-social pathways. Now, the second part of the brain, the amygdala, is associated with fear, anxiety, and threat detection. So a regular, genuine gratitude practice can rapidly reduce amygdala activity in women. This was actually studied specifically done in women. It can upregulate feelings of motivation and well-being, and it can downregulate less favorable pathways of fear and anxiety, which the amygdala helps control. So gratitude can help both of these areas in the brain and shift us more towards those feelings of positivity and extracting greater joy and detail from events and certain circumstances that we find ourselves in. So the components of a science-backed gratitude practice for all of the brain health benefits. You have to reflect on when you did something that elicited true gratitude from someone else. This can be yourself or others. So you can reflect on a certain circumstance where you experienced true gratitude from someone else for something that you did, or you can put yourself in the shoes of someone else who received gratitude from someone else for something that they did. Either way works. So it doesn't have to be something that you experience, but as long as you're connecting emotionally to the experience of this other person that you're reflecting on. It is important that, again, as long as you perceive that the person giving the gratitude is genuine. That is important. You can't just think of the time that, you paid for someone ahead of you's meal and they said, "Oh, thank you," and then rushed off. I don't know if I would perceive that necessarily as genuine. You have to think of a genuine interaction where you genuinely felt that someone was grateful for an action of another person or an action that you performed. Again, it's important that you relate and connect with it emotionally. So you can't just think of something where you're not actually connecting to the person in the story, whether that's you or with someone else. In some ways you can do this to help build that connection. You can start by writing it out. Write out very lengthy, like this is what happened, event by event, next. Write it all out and write it in great detail. Whether it's your experience or the experience of someone else. Write down the emotions that it makes you feel in that circumstance at that time point throughout the story. Just write it out super lengthy. Describe the emotions and describe why you feel connected, to really put it down on paper and to really think through that interaction. And then later on, you can go back and shorten it into bullet points so that when you're trying to get into that gratitude state, you have these quick access bullet points to remind you of that interaction or that reflection on a certain circumstance between someone else and the person that is giving the gratitude. It'll just be like a quick access bullet point list for you to refer back to. So a little bit of an example, when I was doing this, when I was building my own gratitude practice, I believe I'll link the blog post, but I wrote this blog post for American Thanksgiving last year because it's all about gratitude. So I wrote it last November, so I'll link it in the show notes, but when I first was thinking, okay, what is my situation? The very first thing that came to mind was the story of Dick and Rick Hoyt. And this is just such a feel-good story. I'll share it with you guys if you guys don't know it, but I'll also leave the link because I cry every time when I see this video. But it is a father-son duo who, and I believe the son, I'm forgetting which one's Dick and which one's Rick, but Dick and Rick Hoyt, it's a super just inspiring story. But the son, I believe he has cerebral palsy. And so he was wheelchair bound. He wasn't able to communicate in the same way that you and I are. It's just, yeah, he just had limitations, both physical and verbal, and just, yeah, he wasn't able to move in the way that we're able to move. And he said something, I should have refreshed myself on this story, but he said something, he typed something along the lines of like inspiring his dad to pick up like running or marathons in some way. So I forget how the story went down, but he basically inspired his dad to pick up running. And his dad was not the healthiest guy. This is self-proclaimed. He was not the healthiest guy, but he was like, okay, my son who's in a wheelchair wants to run. I'm going to have to be his feet for him, right? And so oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. This is like, this story just gets to me. So see, this is that emotional connection to that story. So the dad starts training for, I believe, like a 5K at first, or maybe a half marathon. And then he starts to go the distance, right? He starts to enter in marathons. And when I actually found them, they were doing Ironmans, which is a marathon, lengthy swim, lengthy bike ride. And he would pull his son in an inflatable boat behind him as he swam. He would have him on the bike with him as he biked. He would push him in his wheelchair as he ran. Like, it's just this super inspiring story of a son inspiring his father to take up healthy habits in order to help his son feel, just like more of a normal kid, right? Because running and moving and just experiencing the world in that way. And there was this part, I might actually cry, but there was, I guess, a computer that he ended up getting in order to communicate. And I forget the first words that he said, but he said something along the lines that when we run together, Dad, it feels like my disability disappears. And that's one of the first things that he wrote on this computer for his dad. And it was just super impactful and super inspiring, because here was this son who had these physical limitations, and here was this father who sacrificed a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and honestly got healthier. So there was also some benefit to him too, but he did all of that for his son. It's effortful to push a wheelchair instead of swinging your arms when running. It's got to be that much harder to do an open water swim. And as someone who's done triathlons before, it just really, really spoke to me as something that I really connected with. And I knew how hard that was for the dad, but how grateful he was that his son was able to communicate that to him, and how grateful the son was to have his dad be his arms, legs, feet movement, like in general. So when I was first creating my own gratitude practice, that's the first story that I thought of. And again, I'll leave the link below because it truly is inspiring to me. It's very heartwarming. And I believe a few years ago, the father actually passed away. And so, it's just a really, really cool story. So something like that connects with you, that you can reflect on, and that you can actually put yourself in those situations. I'm an emotional person, so I'm going to cry when I tell the story that I connect with. But that is the first thing that I thought of as something that I can reflect on, as a way for me to put myself in the shoes of the father and receive gratitude from the son for the hard work and effort that the father put in order to help his son feel limitless. So as far as the actual logistics of the gratitude practice go, the timing and frequency, it should be 1 to 5 minutes of reflection at a time. It's super quick. It doesn't take that long. 3 times a week minimum. And the pathways are very adaptable. So we can see some of the brain health benefits pretty immediately. It's not this long-term, probably like exercise, right? Where it doesn't feel like we get the benefits immediately. Sometimes we're doing it for the long haul. This one, we can see the benefits and we can experience the benefits pretty immediately. So to put it all together, an effective gratitude practice needs a story or experience that you relate to, in which you are able to experience the genuine gratitude the person in the story is receiving from someone else. And this can be a reflection of yourself and an experience you had, or a reflection on someone else and the experiences that they had, like Dick and Rick Hoyt. It has to be 1 to 5 minutes in length. It's 3 times a week or more. And as a little bonus, you can add an additional breathwork practice on top of it for those 1 to 5 minutes of that gratitude practice to help get all of the nervous system benefits and really, really, really solidify all of those changes happening in the brain with an effective, genuine gratitude practice. So I hope you guys learned something from this. Again, this is one of my favorite topics because I really do think gratitude is, I've noticed any time that I've gone through a difficult time, if I can shift my focus to being grateful, knowing that my momentary struggles are going to produce something greater long term, whatever it is, however I can shift my mind, I've realized that approaching things with gratitude can really help. It also, I do feel like, helps me be more consistent in my workouts because I am feeling, in the sisterhood, we start our workouts every time and end our workouts every time with gratitude for ourselves and what our body was able to accomplish. So we try and receive gratitude from ourselves for all that our bodies were able to do for us. So yeah, I feel like gratitude's played a huge role in my life. And I definitely, before learning about this maybe 2 or 3 years ago of what an effective gratitude practice was, I was one of those. And again, I still think that's great. Like writing down what you're grateful for, always great, always good to have like some quick little nuggets of things you can grab onto that you're grateful for. But knowing that this is more of the way that we can get some of those brain health benefits is all that much more enticing for me to include week to week because, again, yeah, I'm all about the brain health benefits and all about incorporating small daily tasks, quick tasks that can help both immediately and in the long term. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys learned a lot. Again, I am very, very grateful for you. I'm very grateful for your support, for listening to this, for sitting with me as I cried. I think this might be the first episode that I cried in, but I'm pretty emotional, so this is not a shocker to any of those who know me, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tell me about your gratitude practices if you guys start to create one, or share the story that really helps you to put yourself in a situation where you are receiving that gratitude. I'd love to hear those. I feel like it'd be cool to have just this wide variety of stories, since you guys already heard mine, that we can sort of reflect on and put ourselves in those situations too. So thank you guys again for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. I'm very, very grateful for you, and I'll see you guys again on the next episode of the Wellness Big Sis podcast.